The water was calm. Then the steel giants came into range. Through my headphones, the ocean whispered its secrets, distant propeller beats cutting through the Pacific like mechanical heartbeats, growing stronger with each passing second. I pressed the hydrophones tighter against my ears, my hands trembling not from fear, but from the electric anticipation that every submariner knows when the hunt is about to begin. 23 Japanese warships were steaming straight toward us in the pre-dawn darkness of October 23, 1944. And they had no idea that USS Darter and her sister boat Dace were waiting in the shadows of Palawan Passage like twin predators, ready to strike first blood in what would become the largest naval battle in history. My name is Petty Officer Second Class Tom Bradley, and I've been operating sonar equipment aboard submarines for 3 years now. But nothing, not the training at New London, not the previous war patrols through Japanese-controlled waters, had prepared me for this moment. The green glow of my sonar screen painted eerie shadows across my face as I sat hunched over the hydrophoning equipment in Darter's cramped forward torpedo room, my ears tuned to the mechanical symphony of Admiral Takao Kurita's powerful center force. Contact bearing 017, range approximately 30,000 yards. I whispered into the intercom, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. Commander David McClintock's response crackled back immediately through the boat's communication system. Confirmed, Bradley. What do you make of it? I closed my eyes and listened deeper, letting the sound waves paint a picture in my mind that no periscope could capture in the darkness. The rhythmic thrum of massive screws churning through the water, the deep vibrations of heavy machinery, the unmistakable acoustic signature of capital ships moving in formation. Sir, I'm counting multiple heavy contacts. Fast screws, big engines. This isn't a convoy, it's a battle fleet. The submarine suddenly felt smaller around me as the implications sank in. For months, American intelligence had been tracking Japanese fleet movements, knowing that Admiral Kurita was planning something big. Our submarines Darter and Dace had been patrolling this stretch of water between the Philippines and Borneo for weeks, waiting for exactly this moment. The Japanese were making their move, and we were about to give them a reception they'd never forget. Through the boat's intercom system, I could hear Commander McClintock coordinating with Lieutenant Commander Bladen Claggett aboard Dace, which was running parallel to us about 10 miles to the north. Both submarines had been modified specifically for long-range patrols, equipped with the latest sonar equipment and loaded with Mark 18 electric torpedoes, weapons that would leave no wake to betray our position after we fired. All hands, this is the captain, McClintock's voice echoed through Darter's narrow corridors. We have positive contact with a major Japanese naval force. This is what we've been waiting for, men. Battle stations, Torpedo. The submarine transformed around me as 68 men moved with practiced precision to their combat positions. The gentle hum of our electric motors was replaced by the tense silence of a predator preparing to strike. In the torpedo room forward of my sonar station, I could hear Chief Petty Officer Murphy and his team making final preparations on our fish, checking gyroscope settings, arming warheads, flooding torpedo tubes. Bradley, give me a continuous plot, Commander McClintock ordered. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. I adjusted my headphones and focused on the approaching sound signatures, my trained ears dissecting each acoustic contact like a conductor reading sheet music. The lead ships were definitely heavy cruisers. Their 8-inch gun turrets and massive displacement created unmistakable sound patterns. Behind them, I could detect the deeper thrumming of what had to be battleships, their enormous bulk displacing thousands of tons of seawater with each mile they covered. Sir, lead contact is now bearing 015, range 25,000 yards and closing. Speed approximately 18 knots. I'm tracking what appears to be heavy cruisers in the van, followed by larger contacts that matched the acoustic signature of battleships. Outstanding work, Bradley. Keep me informed of any course changes. As the Japanese fleet drew closer, I began to pick up individual ship signatures. The lead vessel had the distinctive acoustic pattern of an Atago-class heavy cruiser, its 4 screws and powerful machinery creating a sound as unique as a fingerprint to trained sonar operators like myself. This had to be Admiral Kurita's flagship, Atago, leading the entire center force through Palawan Passage. The minutes crawled by like hours as we tracked the approaching fleet. I could feel sweat beating on my forehead despite the cool temperature inside the submarine. Every submariner knows that the moments before an attack are when your nerves are tested most severely. The Japanese ships were now so close that I could distinguish individual machinery sounds. The whir of ventilation fans, the thrum of generators, even the higher-pitched whine of fire control radars sweeping the surface. Range now 15,000 yards, sir, I reported. Formation appears to be in column, with heavy cruisers leading followed by battleships and destroyers. Very well. Sonar. I need you to identify the lead ship for targeting purposes. I concentrated on the acoustic signature of the nearest contact, comparing it to the recognition patterns we'd memorized during training. The four-screw configuration, the engine RPM, the overall size and displacement, everything pointed to one conclusion. Sir, based on acoustic analysis, lead contact appears to be a Atago-class heavy cruiser. Probable identification, Japanese heavy cruiser Atago. A pause, then McClintock's voice came back with barely contained excitement. If that's Atago, then Admiral Kurita is aboard her. Gentlemen, we have the opportunity to decapitate the entire Japanese center force before the battle even begins. Dawn was still 2 hours away as we maneuvered into attack position, but the Pacific Ocean around us was far from empty. Through my sonar equipment, I was tracking not just Admiral Kurita's main force, but also the scattered signatures of destroyers and screening vessels spread across miles of ocean. The Japanese had arranged their fleet in a classic approach formation, heavy cruisers Atago and Maya in the lead, followed by the massive battleships Yamato, Musashi, Nagato, and Kongo, with destroyers providing anti-submarine screening on the flanks. What they didn't know was that their screening formation had a fatal flaw. The destroyers were spaced too far apart to provide effective sonar coverage, and they were moving too fast to conduct proper anti-submarine searches. Commander McClintock had spotted this weakness immediately, positioning Darter directly in the path of the lead cruisers, while Dace moved to intercept the follow-on battleships. Bradley. I need constant bearing and range updates, the captain ordered as we closed to attack position. One mistake here, and we'll have half the Imperial Navy dropping depth charges on us. Aye, aye, sir. Lead contact now bears 010, range 8,000 yards. Speed steady at 18 knots, course unchanged. I could hear the excitement building throughout Submarine as we prepared for what could be the most important torpedo attack of the Pacific War. In the torpedo room, Chief Murphy was personally checking each of our 6 forward tubes. Loaded with Mark 18 electric torpedoes set to run at a depth of 10 feet, shallow enough to hit the cruisers below their armored belt, deep enough to avoid the surface chop. Torpedo room reports all tubes ready, sir, came Murphy's voice over the intercom. Very well. Sonar, what's the range to target? 6,000 yards in closing, sir. Target is maintaining course and speed. Commander McClintock was now at the periscope, making final visual observations in the dim pre-dawn light. Even with Japanese lookouts scanning the horizon, our submarine's low profile and dark paint scheme made us virtually invisible against the black ocean. I can see her, McClintock reported, his voice tight with concentration. She's a beauty, a heavy cruiser, probably Atago like you identified, Bradley. Admiral's flags flying from her mainmast. Range looks to be about 5,000 yards. This was the moment every submariner dreams of, a perfect setup on a high-value target with ideal firing conditions. The sea was calm, visibility was poor for Japanese lookouts, and our target was steaming straight and steady with no evasive maneuvers. We had achieved complete tactical surprise. Final bearing and shoot, Commander McClintock ordered. Set, came the response from the torpedo data computer operator. Fire 1, the submarine shuddered slightly as our first torpedo left the tube, followed immediately by 5 more in rapid succession. 6 Mark 18 electric torpedoes, each carrying 570 pounds of Torpex explosive, were now running silent and true toward the Japanese flagship at 46 knots. All fish running hot, straight, and normal, I reported, tracking their progress on sonar. Time to target, approximately 4 minutes. Now came the hardest part, waiting. Unlike the movies, submarine torpedo attacks aren't over in seconds. Our electric torpedoes would take nearly 4 minutes to cover the distance to target, 4 minutes during which anything could go wrong. The Japanese might spot the torpedo wakes. They might change course, or their screening destroyers might detect our submarine and attack. Bradley, keep tracking those torpedoes, McClintock ordered, and watch for any course changes by the target. Aye, sir. Torpedoes maintaining course. Target still steady on bearing 010, speed 18 knots. Through my headphones, I could hear the mechanical wire off our torpedoes' electric motors growing fainter as they approached their target. The Japanese cruiser continued steaming forward, completely unaware that 6 deadly fish were closing the gap at nearly 50 knots. 3 minutes to impact, I announced. The tension in Darter's control room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Every man aboard knew that we were about to fire the opening shots of what would become the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval engagement in history. If our attack succeeded, we would eliminate Admiral Kurita's flagship and possibly kill the Japanese commander himself before his fleet could even engage American landing forces at Leyte. 2 minutes to impact. Target maintaining course and speed. I could feel my heart pounding as I listened to the approaching collision between our torpedoes and 20,000 tons of Japanese steel. In the torpedo room, Chief Murphy and his team were already preparing to reload our tubes for a follow-up attack on the next ship in line. 1 minute to impact, I announced, my voice barely steady. Then, through my headphones, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of multiple explosions erupting against a ship shoal, followed immediately by the horrific grinding and tearing of metal as seawater rushed into ruptured compartments. Hit. Multiple hits. I shouted into the intercom. I'm hearing massive flooding and secondary explosions. Through my sonar headphones, the death of Atago sounded like the collapse of a steel cathedral. The initial torpedo explosions had been sharp and violent, 4 distinct detonations as our Mark 18s found their target. But what followed was even more devastating. The progressive failure of a 20,000-ton warship as seawater flooded her engine rooms and magazines. I whispered, listening to the cacophony of destruction. She's breaking up fast. Sir. Commander McClintock was already at the periscope, watching our handiwork in the dim, pre-dawn light. I can see her listing heavily to port, he reported. There are fires amidships, and she's definitely going down by the bow. Outstanding shooting, men, but we couldn't celebrate yet. Even as Atago died beneath the waves, the rest of Admiral Kurita's fleet was still approaching, and now they knew they were under attack. Through my sonar equipment, I could hear the distinctive high-pitched whine of active sonar from Japanese destroyers as they began searching for our submarine. Multiple sonar contacts, no pinging, I reported. Destroyers are starting an active search pattern. All ahead full, McClintock ordered. Take us deep and rig for depth charge attack. We need to get out of here before those tin cans find us. Darter dove toward the relative safety of deeper water, but Admiral Kurita's flagship wasn't the only target in our sights. 10 miles to the north, USS Dace under Lieutenant Commander Claggett was setting up her own attack on the second ship in the Japanese column, heavy cruiser Maya. I switched my sonar focus to track Dace's attack, knowing that our sister submarine was about to deliver the second punch in what would be a devastating 1-2 combination. Through the underwater acoustic network that connected all submarines in the area, I could monitor Claggett's approach on his target. Dace is in attack position, I reported to Commander McClintock. She's targeting what appears to be another heavy cruiser. The beauty of our coordinated attack was its timing. While the Japanese were focused on the destruction of their flagship and searching for Darter, Dace was able to approach her target from a different angle with complete tactical surprise. Lieutenant Commander Claggett had learned from our attack, positioning his submarine perfectly to catch Maya as she turned to avoid our torpedo attack. Through my headphones, I heard the distinctive sound signature of torpedo launches as Dace fired her spread at the second Japanese cruiser. 4 Mark 14 torpedoes, running hot and true toward a target that had no idea death was approaching at 46 knots. Dace has fired, I announced. 4 fish in the water, running toward the second heavy cruiser. The Japanese were now in complete chaos. Their flagship was sinking with Admiral Kurita barely escaping in a destroyer. Their formation was scattered, and they were taking fire from submarines they couldn't locate. Through my sonar, I could hear the confusion, ships changing course randomly, destroyers racing back and forth, dropping depth charges and false contacts, radio chatter flooding the airwaves as junior officers tried to figure out what was happening. Impact in 30 seconds, I reported, tracking Dace's torpedoes as they closed with Maya. Then it happened again, the terrible sound of high explosives detonating against a warship's hull, followed by the grinding collapse of internal bulkheads as the sea claimed another victim. Maya had taken at least 3 torpedo hits, and like her sister ship Atago, she was mortally wounded. "Second target hit," I announced. "Multiple explosions. Sounds like she's flooding fast." In less than 20 minutes, American submarines had eliminated 2 of Admiral Kurita's most powerful heavy cruisers, along with their experienced crews and vital fire control equipment. The Japanese center force, which had been approaching Leyte Gulf with overwhelming confidence, was now missing its flagship and its second-in-command. But the battle was far from over. Through my sonar, I could detect the massive acoustic signatures of Japanese battleships, Yamato, Musashi, Nagato, and Kongo, still approaching with their escort of destroyers. These were the most powerful warships in the world, armed with guns that could destroy anything the U.S. Navy could put to sea. "Sir, I'm tracking 4 large contacts, bearing 020, I reported. Acoustic signature matches battleship-class vessels. They're maintaining course toward Leyte Gulf." Commander McClintock studied the tactical situation from the periscope. Even though we had scored a devastating first strike, the core of Kurita's battle fleet was still intact and dangerous. Yamato alone carried 9 18.1-inch guns that could sink any American cruiser or destroyer with a single salvo. "We've bloodied their nose," McClintock said grimly, "but the real fight is just beginning. Bradley, I need you to track those battleships. Our job now is to shadow them and report their position to Admiral Halsey's fleet." As Darter settled into her new role as scout and shadow, I reflected on what we had accomplished. In the first 20 minutes of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, American submarines had eliminated 2 major Japanese warships and sent Admiral Kurita's flagship to the bottom with her entire command staff. We had struck first, struck hard, and achieved complete tactical surprise. Through my headphones, I could still hear the distant sounds of Atago and Maya as they made their final plunge to the ocean floor, 20,000 tons of Japanese steel and hundreds of sailors disappearing into the depths of Palawan Passage. It was a sound I would carry with me for the rest of my life. As Darter shadowed the surviving Japanese fleet through the morning hours of October 23rd, I maintained constant sonar contact with Admiral Kurita's remaining ships. The acoustic picture painted by my hydrophones told a story of a fleet in crisis. Course changes every few minutes, destroyers racing back and forth in anti-submarine patterns, and the steady thrum of damage control pumps working overtime on ships that had suffered near misses from our torpedo attack. "Range to lead battleship contact," Commander McClintock asked as we trailed the Japanese at a safe distance. "Approximately 12,000 yards, sir," I reported. Formation appears to be Yamato in the lead, followed by Musashi, then the older battleships Nagato and Kongo. They're making turns for about 22 knots now, faster than before. The increase in speed told us that Admiral Kurita, now aboard the destroyer Kishinami after his flagship's destruction, was trying to outrun any additional submarine attacks. But what he didn't realize was that American submarines weren't his only problem. Our torpedo attack had done more than sink 2 cruisers. It had also alerted every U.S. Navy unit in the Philippines to the presence of the Japanese center force. Through our submarine's radio equipment, I could monitor the flood of contact reports being transmitted to Admiral William Bull Halsey's Third Fleet. Shore-based aircraft were being scrambled from newly captured Philippine airfields. Carrier task forces were turning toward the sound of battle, and every available submarine in the Western Pacific was converging on Kurita's position. "We've stirred up a hornet's nest," Commander McClintock observed as he monitored the radio traffic. "Half the Pacific Fleet is heading this way." But our job wasn't finished. As Darter continued tracking the Japanese fleet, Lieutenant Commander Claggett aboard Dace was positioning his submarine for another attack. The sinking of Maya had been just the beginning. Claggett had identified another target in the Japanese formation and was maneuvering for a follow-up strike. "Dace is setting up on what appears to be a damaged heavy cruiser," I reported, listening to the underwater communications between our submarines. "Looks like one of our near misses from the first attack caused flooding. She's making reduced speed." This was heavy cruiser Takao, sister ship to the sunken Atago. Our initial torpedo spread had included several fish that missed their primary target, but one had found Takao and damaged her steering gear. Now she was limping along at reduced speed, making her a perfect target for Dace's second attack. Through my sonar headphones, I listened as Claggett closed to attack range and fired another spread of torpedoes. This time, however, the Japanese were ready. As soon as Takao's lookout spotted the torpedo wakes, she began evasive maneuvers while her escorting destroyers raced toward Dace's position. Dace has fired, but the target is maneuvering, I reported. Destroyers are closing on Dace's position fast. The next few minutes were tense as we listened to Dace trying to escape the pursuing Japanese destroyers. Depth charges began exploding in the water around our sister submarine as she dove deep and attempted to evade detection. Through the ocean's natural acoustic network, every explosion was transmitted directly to my sonar equipment aboard Darter. Dace is under attack, I announced. Heavy depth charging from multiple destroyers. Commander McClintock made a difficult decision. We could continue shadowing the main Japanese battle line, or we could turn to assist Dace in her battle with the destroyers. The tactical situation demanded that we maintain contact with Kurita's battleships, but submariner tradition dictated that we help our sister boat. We stick with the battleships, McClintock decided grimly. Claggett knows his business. He'll get Dace out of there. Our job is to keep track of those battle wagons. It was the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier to listen to the depth charge attack on Dace. For 20 minutes, Japanese destroyers pounded the water around our sister submarine with patterns of depth charges, each explosion transmitted through the ocean to my sensitive hydrophones. But Lieutenant Commander Claggett was an experienced submarine commander, and Dace was a tough boat. Gradually, the depth charging moved away as the Japanese destroyers lost contact and returned to their screening positions. Dace appears to have evaded, I reported with relief. Depth charging has ceased, and I can hear her electric motors running normally. Our successful attack had cost Admiral Kurita 2 heavy cruisers and hundreds of experienced sailors, but more importantly, it had shattered Japanese confidence in their approach to Leyte Gulf. Through intercepted radio transmissions, we learned that Kurita was already considering turning back rather than facing the American fleet with his reduced forces. Bradley, what's the current position and course of those battleships? McClintock asked. Sir, lead elements are now bearing 035, range 14,000 yards. Course appears to be 270, speed 22 knots. They're heading directly for San Bernardino Strait. San Bernardino Strait was the narrow passage between Philippine Islands that would allow Kurita's fleet to reach Leyte Gulf and attack the American landing forces. If the Japanese battleships made it through the strait, they could devastate the invasion fleet with their massive guns. Our submarine attack had been successful, but it hadn't stopped the core of Kurita's battle force. Signal Admiral Halsey, McClintock ordered. Japanese center force consisting of 4 battleships and escorts is proceeding toward San Bernardino Strait at 22 knots. We have eliminated 2 heavy cruisers, but the main battle line remains intact. As we transmitted our contact report, I continued monitoring the Japanese fleet through my sonar equipment. The acoustic signatures told a story of ships pushed to their limits, engines running at maximum power, propellers cavitating from the high speed, and the constant chatter of radio communications as officers tried to coordinate their scattered formation. Sir, I'm detecting what sounds like aircraft engines, I announced suddenly. High-pitched, multiple contacts, bearing from the northeast. American or Japanese? McClintock asked. I listened carefully to the engine signatures, comparing them to the recognition patterns we'd memorized during training. Sound like American radial engines, sir. Probably carrier aircraft. Admiral Halsey's pilots had found their target. The air attack on Admiral Kurita's fleet began at 10:30 hours, just as Darter reached a perfect observation position 8 miles from the Japanese battle line. Through my sonar headphones, I could hear the approach of dozens of aircraft, the distinctive rumble of Grumman F-6F Hellcats, the deeper roar of Curtiss B-2C Helldivers, and the steady drone of Grumman TBF Avengers loaded with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs. Multiple aircraft contacts approaching from the northeast, I reported to Commander McClintock. Sounds like a full carrier strike. What followed was the most devastating naval air attack I would witness during the entire war. Wave after wave of American carrier aircraft swept down on Kurita's battleships, their pilots determined to finish what our submarines had started. Through the periscope, Commander McClintock provided a running commentary of the destruction above. "They're concentrating on Musashi," he reported. "I count at least 20 dive bombers in attack formation. She's putting up a hell of a flak barrage, but they're pressing home their attacks." The sound of the air battle was transmitted through the water to my sonar equipment, the whistle of falling bombs, the crash of explosions against armored deck plating, and the secondary detonations as aviation fuel and ammunition went up. Musashi, one of the 2 largest battleships ever built, was taking a merciless pounding from American dive bombers and torpedo planes. "She's been hit hard," McClintock continued his periscope observations. "I can see fires amidships, and she's developing a list to port. They're hitting her with everything they've got." Between air attacks, I tracked the Japanese fleet's attempts to continue toward San Bernardino Strait. But the constant bombing had reduced their speed and scattered their formation. Musashi was falling behind, her massive bulk settling deeper into the water with each bomb hit. "The big one's in trouble," I reported, listening to the acoustic signature of Musashi's engines. "Her screws are running rough, and I'm detecting massive flooding sounds." Admiral Kurita was facing a nightmare scenario. His flagship had been sunk by submarines, his heavy cruisers were gone, and now American carrier aircraft were systematically destroying his battleships. The Japanese admiral, who had approached Leyte Gulf with supreme confidence, was now fighting for the survival of his fleet. "Signal from Dace," our radioman reported. "Claggett reports he damaged heavy cruiser Takao with 1 torpedo hit. She's limping back toward Brunei with destroyer escort." So our submarine attack had eliminated 3 major Japanese warships, Atago and Maya sunk, Takao damaged and retreating. Combined with the ongoing air attacks, we had reduced Kurita's force by nearly half before the surface battle even began. Through the afternoon, I continued tracking the Japanese fleet as American air attacks hammered them without mercy. Musashi, pride of the Imperial Navy, was slowly settling by the bow as her damage control teams fought a losing battle against progressive flooding. Her sister ship Yamato had taken several bomb hits but remained operational, while the older battleships Nagato and Congo were suffering accumulated damage from near misses and fragmenting bombs. "Musashi's engine sounds are getting weaker," I reported during a brief lull in the air attacks. "I think she's losing propulsion." Commander McClintock raised the periscope for another observation. "She's definitely settling by the bow," he confirmed. "I can see her forward turrets nearly awash. She won't last much longer." At 15:35 hours, the acoustic signature of Musashi changed dramatically. Through my headphones, I heard the terrible sounds of a battleship's death throes, internal explosions as sea water reached her magazines, the grinding collapse of bulkheads, and finally the deep, groaning noise of 73,000 tons of steel rolling over and beginning its final plunge to the ocean floor. "She's capsizing," I announced. "Musashi is rolling over." Through the periscope, Commander McClintock watched one of the most powerful warships ever built disappear beneath the waves. "There she goes," he said quietly. "She's taking her whole crew with her." The sinking of Musashi marked the end of Admiral Kurita's dreams of reaching Leyte Gulf with an intact battle fleet. Though Yamato and the other surviving battleships would continue toward San Bernardino Strait, they were now badly damaged and demoralized. The Japanese center force, which had begun the day as the most powerful naval striking force in the Pacific, was now a shadow of its former strength. As evening approached and the air attacks finally ceased, I provided Commander McClintock with a final assessment of the Japanese fleet's condition. "Sir, based on acoustic analysis, I count 1 heavy battleship still operational, probably Yamato, along with 2 older battleships showing significant damage. Multiple destroyer contacts, but at reduced speed. The formation is scattered and appears to be in some disorder." "Outstanding work, Bradley," McClintock replied. "Signal Admiral Halsey. Japanese center force severely damaged by coordinated submarine and air attacks. Enemy has lost 2 heavy cruisers sunk, 1 heavy cruiser damaged and withdrawing, and battleship Musashi sunk. Remaining forces continuing toward San Bernardino Strait, but at reduced strength and capability." As darters secured from battle stations and settled into a routine shadowing patrol, I reflected on what we had accomplished. Our submarine attack in Palawan Passage had been the opening shot of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, eliminating key Japanese warships before the main battle even began. Combined with the devastating air attacks that followed, we had reduced Admiral Kurita's fleet from a war-winning force to a collection of damaged ships limping toward an uncertain fate. Through my headphones, I could still hear the distant sounds of the surviving Japanese ships as they struggled toward San Bernardino Strait. But the acoustic signature told a story of defeat, engines running rough from battle damage, propellers cavitating from desperate attempts to maintain speed, and the constant chatter of damage control efforts throughout the fleet. The submarine war in the Pacific had always been about more than just sinking ships. We were the advance guard of American naval power, the scouts and hunters who weakened the enemy before the main battle. Our attack in Palawan Passage had achieved complete tactical surprise, struck devastating blows against superior forces, and set the stage for what would become the most decisive naval victory in American history. As the sun set over the Philippine Sea on October 23, 1944, I knew that we aboard Darter and Dace had fired the first shots in a battle that would end Japanese naval power forever. The steel giants had come into range, and American submarines had been waiting for them in the calm waters of Palawan Passage. 3 days later, as Darter headed back to port after the conclusion of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, I found myself thinking about the young Japanese sailors who had gone down with Atago and Maya. They had been doing their duty, just as we were doing ours, but war makes no distinction between courage and nationality when the ocean claims its victims. Admiral Kurita's center force never recovered from our submarine ambush in Palawan Passage. Though his surviving ships would eventually engage American forces at Samar Island, they fought without their flagship, their most experienced cruiser crews, and their confidence. The devastating air attacks that followed our torpedo strikes had left the Japanese battle line weakened and demoralized. The final tally spoke for itself. Atago and Maya sunk by submarine attack, Takao damaged and forced to withdraw, Musashi sunk by air attack, and the remaining battleships so badly damaged that they posed little threat to the American invasion forces. In less than 24 hours, we had eliminated more Japanese naval power than in any previous engagement of the Pacific War. But victory came at a price that extended far beyond the ships we sank. Every Japanese vessel that went down carried hundreds of sailors, young men with families, dreams, and futures that ended in the cold depths of the Philippine Sea. As submariner, I had learned to compartmentalize these thoughts, to focus on the mission rather than the human cost. But in quiet moments like this, the weight of what we had done was impossible to ignore. Our submarine attack had been tactically perfect, complete surprise, devastating effectiveness, and minimal risk to American forces. We had struck first, struck hard, and achieved objectives that would have been impossible for surface ships or aircraft operating alone. The coordination between Darter and Dace had been flawless. Our torpedo attacks had been executed with precision, and our post-attack shadowing had provided vital intelligence for the follow-on airstrikes. The Battle of Leyte Gulf would be remembered as the largest naval engagement in history, involving hundreds of ships and thousands of aircraft across thousands of square miles of ocean. But it began in the pre-dawn darkness of Palawan Passage, when 2 American submarines detected the approach of Admiral Kurita's fleet and decided to give them a reception he would never forget. As I secured my sonar equipment and prepared for our return to port, I thought about the broader implications of what we had accomplished. Our attack had not just sunk ships. It had broken the back of Japanese naval aviation, eliminated their most experienced cruiser crews, and shattered their confidence in their ability to conduct major fleet operations. The Imperial Navy would never again sortie with the strength and purpose they had shown at the beginning of October 1944. The water had been calm when we first detected those steel giants approaching through Palawan Passage. But by the time they had passed through our patrol area, the calm had been shattered by torpedo explosions, the ocean floor had been littered with Japanese warships, and the course of the Pacific War had been irrevocably changed. We had done our job as American submariners, silent, deadly, and decisive. In the greatest naval battle in history, we had fired the first shots and achieved the first victories. The steel giants had come into range, and we had been ready for them,